Today, we are actually joined by the Canadian Natural Resources Limited. They'll be sharing configuring and streamlining e-commerce procurement solutions at CNRL.
Good morning, everyone. Canadian Natural's business strategy is very strong. We have great assets, capital discipline, operating excellence, and the ability to strengthen our balance sheet and deliver returns to shareholders. Before I start, I would like to share with you who we are. Canadian Natural Resources has operations in North America, the North Sea, and offshore Africa with over 9,900 employees. Our barrels of oil equivalent is approximately 1.142 per day. Maximo is used in various operations across the divisions. My name is Janet Gattro. I'm an application analyst at Canadian Natural. I've been working with Maximo since late 2014 and have worked in Canadian Natural since 2006, starting with the financial software and moving on to the Maximo software team. I work in the change management group, liaising between the business requests for change and the technical teams for implementation. I am also a CanMUG steering committee member.
My name is Deborah Alvarado. I've been a business support analyst with Electra Learning for 3.5 years, supporting Canadian Natural's Maximo procurement and inventory applications. I've worked in the oil and gas industry for over 20 years, supporting users and systems, doing software implementations, and providing training for software, including SmartPlant, instrumentation, SAP, and Maximo. On this e-commerce solution project, I was responsible for functional testing and test script development.
Hello, my name is Michelle Deering. I'm a supply management professional for Canadian Natural for 10 years and over 30 years experience in supply management and materials management processes, ERP systems, multiple system implementations, continuous improvements, business requirements gathering, user acceptance testing, support, and training. Since late 2014, I've been with Maximo for commercial operations as a supply management project lead for the Maximo implementation and responsible for our Maximo training and communication.
Canadian Natural uses Maximo 7612 to manage their oil sands and thermal asset management, maintenance, inventory, and procurement. In 2018, an initiative was started to leverage the supplier parts and pricing via their online ordering system. This presentation will focus on the configuration put in place to utilize the supplier's online ordering system, along with a streamlined procurement workflow in Maximo to ensure timely order fulfillment with correct pricing. Today, we will present at a high level how Maximo was configured to produce the streamlined e-commerce solution, including an item master update and a simplified workflow. We will follow this agenda today, reviewing the goals, benefits, prerequisites, challenges, successes, and lessons learned. 5 main goals were identified within this project. They included obtaining a significant order discount, syncing the item master with the supplier's catalog, reducing the touches by buyers on PRs and POs, ensuring the correct pricing on the items ordered, introducing a shopping cart system, which returned the items needed from the supplier system onto the work order or PR. All configuration and testing was framed within these goals. 5 benefits were identified that would be fulfilled when the project went into production. The benefits identified were reduce the cost and delays in the material fulfillment, an improvement of the procurement processes, cleanse the Canadian Natural item master, prevent the misuse of the order and line types within the ordering processes. I will hand this presentation over to Michelle Deering.
Thank you, Janet. There were 2 phases for project implementation in August and October of 2018. For phase 1, that included the implementation of our item master update process, streamlined procurement process for our purchase requisition and purchase orders, automated the integration of the item and purchase order information between Maximo and e-com supplier. For our phase 2, that included the creation of the e-com punch-out button to access e-com supplier sites directly from Maximo. Our phase 1, automated sending and receiving of PO and item information between Maximo and e-com supplier systems. This item master update process is where the item masters identified for the e-com supplier will go through a data warehouse and push through our middleware integrations and return with any item master update for site and storeroom. Our streamlined e-procurement processes included the automated script integrations and approval of our Maximo purchase orders. We'll integrate through the Canadian Natural and e-com supplier middleware for initial PO and item data integrity check. Our streamlined procurement approval workflows due to these integrations and validation of POs and item data, acknowledgement and acceptance. Any data integrity or system integration issues will have notifications for action and escalation. Phase 2 was our e-com supplier punch-out access from Maximo. This phase of integration uses an e-com punch-out button to link to our e-com supplier catalog, and will bring back selected items with agreed pricing to Maximo work orders and purchase requisitions. The integration key element of this item catalog number is for all of our item master record updates and for our purchase order validation and response. 8 prerequisites were identified for this project and cover areas such as business processes, data, performance monitoring, and the 8 are listed here. The focus for this e-com procurement project was to maximize effectiveness by minimizing costs and to reduce or eliminate time and effort to process the orders. So for number 1, we clearly identified, reviewed, and updated our business processes by reviewing our current state process mapping and identifying gaps with our stakeholders. 2, created new processes by process and data mapping of various data elements, and identify security profiles required. Number 3, determine the item master data cleansing requirements by assigning our item master data with e-com supplier. Number 4, determine each processes that are in scope by collaborating with the business area stakeholders to identify standardized processes versus unique and multiple processes, and identify those in-scope processes and system integration. Number 5, document data requirements by clearly defined and documented requirements between Canadian Natural and our e-com supplier. Number 6, complete detailed data mapping for integration. The importance of this documentation supports the development and various levels of testing. Number 7, understand the type of visibility and KPIs required to monitor system performance and troubleshooting, such as start centers and port queries for troubleshooting and tracking our e-com error responses, acknowledgements, and PO statuses, notifications for any failed PO integrations and responses, and the use of reporting tools to track KPIs. And lastly, number 8, select an e-com supplier with a high spend and high volume transaction history. Our item masters for each site integrate daily to update with current unit pricing, catalog number validation, and changes with date and timestamp. All e-com identified item masters are updated monthly. Our inventory analysts or master data team manage the item master for invalid data or replacements to keep our job plans and our inventory records current. For our standard PR and PO workflow, without e-procurement, it's a manual process of workflow steps and actions. The PR may require a requisition for quotation to one or more suppliers for business approval, before business approval. The PO requires a commercial review and approval of terms and source based on workflow. The purchase order requires a copy to be emailed to our supplier to be validated for order acknowledgement and acceptance. Any changes to the PO are a manual process and approval workflow before a supplier receives a revised PO to revalidate for order acknowledgement and acceptance. So this process may take hours, days, or even weeks from end to end. The e-commerce PR and PO workflow, meeting all of our requirements, cleanse data, and validation between system integrations using this middleware. This workflow leverages a streamlined and automated process with little to no user touch points. Supplier system validations and PO responses are automated with an acceptance and commitment for price and delivery. There's no need to email a copy to the PO to the supplier. This process may only take a few minutes from business approval to automate order acknowledgement and acceptance. There are requirements and data elements that were identified as part of the streamlined integration from Maximo to e-com supplier. So the supplier is e-commerce enabled. We used our oil sands site. The PO types for the streamlined process were standard and stock. The line types we used were items or special ordered items only. Had valid unit pricing, no capitalized items, and we identified mandatory field requirements you see below here. Our PR to PO streamlined workflow for order types, stock, and standard. Our stock PRs will auto-generate to fulfill demand from the inventory item levels and default data elements, allowing for automated approvals and touchless PR to PO process for e-com procurement to supplier. Our standard PRs generated from a planned work order or they're created manually, utilize the item master settings and default data elements, allowing for minimal touch points and require the business approval to meet our grant of authority or GOA threshold. The standard PR workflow has been modified to go directly to the business approval for financial GOA approvals, which allows for auto creation of a PO under certain conditions. For our PO workflow, for standard and stock POs, the commercial review will not be required as long as the following conditions were true. The PO meets the criteria to send through to our e-com supplier middleware. POs revised by integration with e-com rejected are updated, approved, and reintegrated. The PO has not been manually revised by a buyer outside our e-com process and does not exceed a buyer's GOA commitment approval. I will hand this presentation over to Deborah Alvarado.
Thank you, Michelle. Here are some of the changes we've made in Maximo. We've added a new application to track item master updates, the item e-com status. In the company's application, we have new fields, e-commerce enabled and the punch-out URL. In the purchase, requisition, and work order tracking transportation application, we have new e-com punch-out button and a new field from e-com store to indicate part was added using the e-com supplier punch-out functionality. In the purchase order application, on the header, we have new fields, e-com status and e-com date, and a new e-com status table to view PO inbound and outbound responses. At the line level, we have a new field entitled e-com, and again, a new e-com status table to view detailed line statuses and information. We have a new Start Center and Portlet, and in this Start Center, we have a number of portlets which are listed here, which we will discuss in detail a little bit later on. When a PO is in approved status, it will start the e-com integration process and validation. In a perfect scenario, we would have a lights out process from start to finish. If all mandatory fields are populated properly and unit price and part numbers have not changed, the PO will be validated, acknowledged, and returned to Maximo by the e-com supplier with an e-com response accepted and PO status in progress. If there are any discrepancies with unit price or part numbers, as an example, the PO will come back with an e-com response rejected and a new PO revision will be created with a PO status pending revision. If there are any issues with servers or middleware at the e-com supplier or at Canadian Natural, the PO may not integrate properly and the e-com status will remain in sent. If the PO cannot be processed properly, the PO will be returned with an e-com status not processed. In both cases, the PO status will stay in approved. Here is a screenshot of a PO that has been accepted by the e-com supplier. The PO status is in progress, the e-com status is accepted, and the e-com status field date is populated. At the PO line level, the e-com field shows an A for accepted, and the e-com status history table shows details with a time and date stamp. Here is a screenshot of a PO that has been rejected by the e-com supplier and revised by integration. The PO status is pending revision. The revision number is updated. The e-com status is rejected, and the e-com status date field is populated. At the PO line level, the e-com field shows an R for rejected, and the e-com status history table shows details regarding why the line was rejected. In this case, it was due to a price discrepancy along with a time and date stamp. There are a number of reasons a purchase order can be rejected, and details are updated on the purchase order header and the purchase order lines in the e-com status table. A PO can be rejected because the lines have an invalid quantity, invalid parts, parts are replaced by multiple parts, or there is a price discrepancy. When a PO is rejected, the PO line will show a message in the e-com status history table, for example, providing the correct part number or the correct price, which we just saw, so the buyer can update the PO accordingly and workflow it through to integration once again. These portlets in the e-com Start Center are for buyers and the master data team to action. These portlets provide information regarding purchase orders and item master updates. The purpose of the backorder POs accepted portlet informs buyers that the e-com supplier cannot meet the required date on the PO, and the buyer needs to communicate this to the requester and decide on a path forward. The PO's rejected portlet informs buyers that the PO was rejected for whatever reason and revised by integration. The buyer needs to update the PO as required and workflow the PO so it goes through integration again. The new item e-com status portlet informs the master data team that there are changes to an item master which need to be looked into. The POs with no response sent and POs not processed portlets are for the supply management super users and the Maximo support team to action. These portlets provide information regarding problems with the PO inbound or outbound responses. Issues need to be investigated, usually in coordination with the e-com supplier and or the information systems team to determine the root cause and work towards a quick resolution. The e-com punch-out button is available to Maximo users in two applications: work order tracking transportation and purchase requisitions. The button is only available in certain work order and purchase requisition types and in certain work order and purchase requisition statuses. The button is restricted by security. The button is restricted by security, group, and site. This is how the e-com punch-out button appears in the purchase requisition lines. It is similarly displayed on the planned material lines of the work order. The e-com punch-out button is definitely a favorite for many of our users. This button is a link to an e-com supplier site. Users can select materials and check out from the e-com supplier site. The list of selected materials will return to Maximo and populate the work order or the purchase requisition with existing Maximo item master number. If a selected item does not exist in the Maximo item master, then a new item master is created as a special order item type. If users cannot access the part store, they can still add items manually to a work order or a purchase requisition. What are some of the challenges we face during the project and post-project implementation? Building relationships between various groups at Canadian Natural and the e-com supplier was a challenge, but necessary to develop proper mitigation plans and service levels for communication, troubleshooting, integration issues, and outages. Resource availability and test environment availability was also a challenge, but integral in order to properly test throughout the different Maximo environments and project phases. Post-go live, one of the biggest challenges is connectivity issues between Canadian Natural and the e-com supplier. The supply management super users and the Maximo support team are notified of any connectivity issues via the portlets in the e-commerce start center and by email notifications. Due to the volume of transactions, a quick response is required for mitigation and resolution. Data integrity continues to be a challenge. In some instances, there can be a one-to-many relationship in the supplier system by catalog number. What are some of our project successes? We were able to negotiate a discount by using an electronic integration for purchase orders due to a high volume of transactions going through the lights out process. We now have a continuous update of the Canadian Natural item masters with the e-com supplier's part information. This ensures up-to-date unit price and part information and allows a lights out process from start to finish, reducing the overall procurement cycle time. There is a streamlined workflow for purchase requisitions and purchase orders with a limited to no touch points for the supply management group. The new e-com punch-out button allows users to access the e-com supplier's site and populate the planned material lines on the work order and the purchase requisition lines. As mentioned, this functionality is probably the favorite enhancement implemented as part of this project. And as a bonus, we now have project and configuration framework in place, which is easily expandable to bring additional e-com suppliers online. What are some of the lessons learned? When developing requirements, work towards outcome-based, focus on what users want and not how to configure it. Bring the right people into the project at the right time. Ensure business requirements document is robust. Use cases can help determine business requirements, which can also be used for test script development. And perform a business process impact study. Determine the end-to-end process dependencies and ensure the stakeholders impacted by the change are involved and aware. Back to you, Janet.
Thank you, Deborah and Michelle. The following terms will have been mentioned within this presentation. When it's shared post-conference, they will also be available within this document for you to reference. Deborah, Michelle, and I thank you for your time today. The e-commerce solution has been at Canadian Natural for just over 3 years. It has achieved its benefits and goals. We will turn this presentation over to CanMUG for any questions. Questions we cannot answer today, we will follow up with you after the conference.
Thank you so very much, Janet Gatrell, Deborah Alvarado, and Michelle Deering with CNRL. If you have any questions today for any of our presenters, please put them into the question box. Janet, have you been able to calculate the ROI? That's from Emma.
Emma, I'm assuming the return on investment is what you mean by ROI. I'll turn that answer over to Michelle. I'm not sure if we have.
Okay, when we did look at the numbers since we went live in 2018, when we looked at the average POs and stuff that were automated, we're looking at over 150 POs a day that are automated. We've done over 175,000 POs through these automation, and the percentage of the streamlined process that has gone through as enhanced for our standard and our stock orders has been over 80% have been fully streamlined. As for any of the issues that we found, that for integration issues, we were looking at less than 0.1% of any POs that have had any integration issues. So our return on investment in that case and our automated and our touchless points have been hugely significant, especially when we mentioned that our stock process is to go very streamlined, and our majority of our orders are our standard POs. We have over 90% of our purchase orders are standard POs in this process. So I don't know any dollar values or anything in that sense of ROI, but the significant increase in integrations and the time and effort spent has been hugely reduced to minutes on POs versus days and weeks.
Great, thank you.
Thanks,
If you have
Michelle.
time for another question, there is another couple of questions from Elizabeth Clark.
Yes, please go ahead.
Perfect, thanks. She does ask, did you investigate the use of an invoicing module of the e-procurement system implemented?
We do have an established invoicing system, and it is utilized at the end of the receipt process using an integration.
Great. She also asks, was the e-procurement system limited to only stock items? Can you explain why the service type POs were excluded?
So that was out of scope, and they actually do go through the system, but there's usually a lot more discussion that needs to go on with those. So they don't go through the same streamlined process. It was a conscious decision made to do that. The majority of the POs, like Michelle said, are not serviced with our particular e-commerce supplier. So there was a decision made not to include them.
To add to that, on our service and repair type POs do go through there, as Deborah mentioned, but we were looking at less than 4% of our POs overall have been that category, and there's usually some type of quotation involved.
Okay, there's one last question on here. If we have a moment, it's how many vendors are on e-procurement now?
Currently, we just have the one vendor, but as we mentioned, we are fully set up to add new vendors as needed in the coming years.
Perfect. Thank you so very much. I'll turn it back over to you, Kat.